The room is silent, except for the sound of teeth chattering. Patrick and his girlfriend lie pressed together under a paper-thin blanket, their breath rising like smoke into the frozen air. No fire, no heater, just two young heart Patricks. Eyes carried a strange fire, sharp, determined, almost defiant. But when his hands opened, there was nothing inside. No money, no promise of tomorrow, only dreams too heavy for empty pockets. Beside him lay his girlfriend, her face pale from sleepless nights, yet holding a strength that words could never measure. She reminded him gently, "We may have nothing, but we still have us." And in those moments, her voice became his anchor, her presence his only warmth. Poverty wrapped around them like chains, but love, fragile, stubborn, kept them breathing. Their dinners were often just bread dipped in water. Their laughter, when it came, felt borrowed from another world. Yet still they shared it, because even in scarcity their togetherness was their richest possession. But deep in Patrick's heart, a storm was rising. Love was not enough. He knew he had to break free. Hearts clinging to each other, dreaming, warmth they cannot touch. Whispers followed them everywhere. Neighbors bundled in coats shook their heads as Patrick walked by, muttering that dreams couldn't feed a man. Friends who once shared laughter disappeared one by one, leaving only silence where companionship used to live. Even family turned cold. His own blood branded him a failure, a man destined to remain small. The harshest blow came from his girlfriend's parents. Sitting across from her, they spoke with sharp tongues and heavy eyes. "You deserve better than this. Patrick will never give you a life worth living." Each word struck her heart like frost, testing her loyalty, questioning her love. Together, Patrick and his girlfriend felt the world closing in. Every glance carried judgment, every conversation a reminder of what they lacked. Their love was no longer just affection. It became a daily war against doubt, a fragile shield against endless rejection. Still, when night fell, they clung to each other in the cold. For Patrick, those moments whispered both comfort and urgency. He realized the truth. Love might survive poverty, but only if he could carve a future no one else believed in. The battle against the world had just begun. Nights stretched long, the cold biting deeper than hunger. Patrick sat cross-legged on the wooden floor, scraps of paper spread before him. His hands trembled as he drew crooked lines, numbers, and half-formed plans. The ink bled faintly, smudged by fingers stiff with frost. His girlfriend watched from the corner of their small room, wrapped in a blanket too thin to fight the winter. Her eyes followed his every movement, half filled with pride, half shadowed by doubt. She wanted to believe that these sketches were seeds of something greater, yet another part of her, tired and worn, asked in silence, "How long can we live on promises?" Patrick lifted his head, eyes blazing with stubborn hope. "One day these ideas will change everything," he whispered. She nodded softly, hiding her fear behind a faint smile. In that frozen room, love and doubt wrestled quietly, while dreams fought to stay alive against the cold. The night was colder than usual, the kind that crept into bones and refused to leave. Their small room echoed with silence, until hunger spoke louder than love. A single stale loaf of bread sat between them, not enough for two. Patrick tried to laugh it off, talking about the future, about the empire he swore was waiting for them. But his girlfriend's patience finally cracked. Her voice, usually soft, cut like glass. "Dreams can't keep us warm, Patrick. Dreams don't fill our stomachs." The words hung in the air, sharp and heavy, more painful than the cold itself. Patrick froze, his pride wounded, his heart burning. He had always believed her faith was unshakable, but tonight doubt spilled out of her like fire. He stood, fists clenched, eyes wet with frustration. Without another word, he stormed into the freezing night, the door slamming behind him. The D Street was silent, covered in frost. Breath turned to mist as he walked, each step echoing the truth he didn't want to face. Love alone would not save them. For the first time, Patrick understood. If he couldn't turn his dreams into reality, the cold would eventually take everything he loved. Patrick's footsteps crunched against the frozen ground, anger still burning hotter than the winter air. He walked aimlessly, letting the cold punish him until a sudden noise caught his ear, the rumble of a delivery truck. He stopped. Two men struggled to unload brand-new heaters, wheeling them into a grand, brightly lit house. Warmth poured from the doorway like a wave, the kind of comfort Patrick and his girlfriend could only dream of. Inside, laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and the glow of fire painted the walls golden. Outside, he stood shivering, invisible. For a long moment, Patrick's chest tightened with envy. But then something shifted. A thought struck him, sharp as lightning. Warmth wasn't just survival, it was business. Why should comfort belong only to the rich? What if families like his could afford a heater too? His eyes narrowed, the cold, now fueling his determination instead of crushing it. Right there on that frozen street, Patrick made a silent vow. He would design heaters that cost less but gave the same fire. Warmth for the poor, dignity for the forgotten. It was no longer just about escaping the cold. It was about changing the world, one flame at a time. Days turned into a blur of exhaustion. By morning, Patrick carried bricks at construction sites. Scrubbed floors, hauled boxes, anything that paid a few coins. By night, he returned to their dim room, his hands blistered, eyes heavy. Yet still he bent over scraps of wire and broken parts. His girlfriend sat nearby, a blanket around her shoulders, watching as sparks flickered and died. Each time a device failed, her heart sank deeper. Their small savings vanished piece by piece, metal scraps, second-hand tools, wires bought with the last of their food money. She wanted to scream, to tell him to stop, to remind him that survival mattered more than dreams. But every time she opened her mouth, the words dissolved. Instead, silence filled the room, a silence that carried both doubt and loyalty. Though she feared he was dragging them deeper into ruin, she stayed. She stitched his torn shirts, placed bread on the table when she could, and listened to the hum of his endless attempts. Her silence spoke louder than any promise. She wasn't leaving. Patrick, exhausted but unbroken, took her quiet presence as faith. What he didn't realize, her silence was both her sacrifice and her final shield of hope. Nights of failure had piled up like broken parts in the corner, each one a reminder of dreams that seemed impossible. But Patrick refused to stop. His fingers were raw, his eyes bloodshot, yet his will burned hotter than the cold surrounding them. And then it happened. A faint hum broke the silence. Wires sparked, a small light flickered, and suddenly a gentle wave of warmth spilled from the crude device. Patrick froze, almost afraid to believe it. He placed his trembling hand over the heater, and for the first time in years he felt warmth that wasn't borrowed from another body. He called her closer. Cautious, almost unbelieving, his girlfriend reached out. The glow touched her skin, and her lips curved into something he hadn't seen in weeks. A genuine smile. It was fragile, small but real, hope alive again. Tears filled Patrick's eyes. This wasn't just heat. This was proof that their suffering wasn't endless, that his nights of sacrifice had meaning. In that frozen room, with their hands wrapped around the first flicker of warmth, a new chapter began. The heater was tiny, imperfect, but it carried within it the power to change everything. Word spread quietly at first. A neighbor, shivering in her dimly lit room, heard about Patrick's strange little heater. She came hesitantly, clutching a few worn bills. Patrick placed the device in her hands, and when the warmth rose into her face, tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "You've given me back my nights." That single moment lit something in both Patrick and his girlfriend. Soon, another neighbor knocked, then another. Each time Patrick built, repaired, and delivered with blistered hands, while his girlfriend stood by him, taking notes, wrapping cords, carrying hope in silence. The money was little, barely enough to cover scraps and bread. But each sale wasn't about coins, it was about dignity. It was survival earned by their own hands. More than that, it was proof that warmth could spread beyond their own room, touching lives as frozen as theirs once were. As Patrick watched the glow of his heaters in other people's homes, his chest swelled with something richer than pride. It was purpose. And for the first time, his girlfriend's eyes carried more than fragile hope. They carried belief. The fire they had sparked was no longer theirs alone. It was beginning to spread. The orders were growing. Patrick's nights were filled with soldering irons and sparks, his days with deliveries and grateful faces. For the first time, their room didn't feel like a prison. It felt like the birthplace of something new. He worked harder, fueled by the thought that soon they'd never sleep cold again. But one evening, as he tightened the last bolt on a heater, he noticed her silence had changed. She wasn't just tired, she was distant. Her eyes carried a weight heavier than doubt. Finally, with trembling lips, she spoke. "Patrick, I can't do this anymore. My parents are right. You'll never rise." The words shattered him. His hands slipped, the heater clattering to the floor. He searched her face for the love that once fought beside him, but found only resignation. She packed quietly, each movement colder than the winter air outside. When the door closed behind her, the silence screamed louder than any storm. Patrick sank to the floor, his chest hollow. The girl who once endured hunger and frost beside him was gone. Her absence cut deeper than poverty ever had. The cold in the room no longer came from the air. It came from the empty space she left behind. The nights were unbearable now. The blanket felt heavier without her beside him, and the silence gnawed at his chest. Patrick lay awake, the cold pressing against his skin, replaying her words again and again. "You'll never rise." Each repetition felt like a knife. But instead of breaking him, the pain hardened him. He dragged himself from bed, stomach empty, hands shaking, and returned to his table of wires and scraps. Failure no longer scared him. Losing had already cost him everything. Each time the cold seeped through the cracks, he worked faster. Each time his body begged for rest, he soldered another wire, built another frame. Hunger clawed at him, yet his fire only grew. He was alone now, but his resolve was unshakable. He would prove her wrong. He would prove the world wrong. The cold could strip him of love, warmth, even comfort, but it could never take his will to rise. The day came when Patrick's small prototypes reached hands beyond his neighborhood. A single investor noticed, then another. Soon, the same world that once mocked him was now calling his name. Orders poured in faster than his tired hands could build. Factories replaced his basement. Sparks turned into assembly lines, machines roaring with the sound of progress. His heaters, once scraps, stitched together in the dark, now carried warmth into thousands of homes. Families that once shivered as he had were now gathering in comfort thanks to him. Patrick walked into grand boardrooms, the same sharp eyes still burning, but no longer shadowed by poverty. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was leading an empire built from hunger, heartbreak, and fire. The boy who once froze in silence had become the man who gave warmth to millions. Years slipped by, carrying Patrick from shadows into light. One evening, as headlines flashed across television screens, his ex-girlfriend froze. There he was, Patrick. No longer the boy with trembling hands and empty pockets, but a billionaire standing before cameras, speaking of innovation, of warmth for the forgotten. Her chest tightened as memories rushed back. The frozen nights under, a thin blanket, the taste of stale bread, the glow of that first flickering heater. She remembered his whispered promises, the ones she never believed would bloom. Now, the man she left behind had risen higher than anyone imagined. She saw the warmth in his eyes, not just wealth but purpose, and for the first time in years regret settled heavy in her heart. The boy she abandoned in the cold had become the man who gave the world its fire. Patrick's voice echoes like a promise carved from pain and triumph. Sometimes the coldest nights build the strongest fire. Then, turning to us, the unseen audience, he adds, "If this story touched you, don't let it fade into silence. Subscribe and let's keep the fire burning together."